Go.
Emmanuel Taban, welcome back to the Sparkit podcast.
Thank you, Patrick. Thanks for having me again here. It's exciting always to be on this pocket podcast. Good to see
Absolutely. How
you.
are you feeling?
I'm doing good, man. It's just cold over here, extremely cold. We're experiencing like temperatures of over minus 38, and yeah, but we're coping with it. Yeah,
Minus 38.
minus 38. It's crazy, man.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think here is like right now it's minus 11.
Oh, that's nothing.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
much. Yesterday was minus 1.
Oh my God. That's good, man. That's
Yeah. I
that's
feel
the
like
one.
Ontario is just much better in terms of
It
weather
is.
compared
Yeah.
to Yukon.
Yeah, but also I feel like if like I mean being in the Yukon, like it's one of the proofs that you've been to Canada. I think maybe one time you should you should come this side. Yeah.
By the way, it's one of those places I plan to visit.
Yeah, it's man. I feel like when you go back to Africa and you want to tell people stories of how cold it is, I mean, it won't make any sense that you've been to Canada. So being in the Yukon, it's one of the, I mean, evidence that you've actually been to Canada. It's a good one. Yeah,
That is so true.
yeah. But yeah, it's good. It's a good one here. Everything is fine, and you're coping up with the weather. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's nice. So I wanted us to chat a little bit uh, about South Sudan, but in particular the peace agreement.
Right.
So South Sudan has been under a transitional period since 2018,
Right.
and particularly governed by the peace agreement, the revitalized peace agreement on the resolution of the conflict in South Sudan. And the transitional period has been extended for so many times, at least like over the past few years. And now there are discussions around a planned election uh, that is likely to happen in December 2026. And I'm just wondering, like, for listeners who might not have an idea, what is this transitional agreement period, and why is it such a big deal, especially for ordinary South Sudanese?
The transitional period, just like the name suggests, um, and in respect with the situation in South Sudan, I think it's part of the period that is stated in the revitalized uh, peace agreement on the resolution of conflict in South Sudan, and it's supposed to be that temporary period where South Sudan was to be, I mean, transition from that conflict into a democratic and peaceful and stable state. And so when we look from 2018, there are mainly two phases, I would say, of the transitional period. There's what we call the pre-transitional period, where it's supposed to be for 8 months, and that was supposed to be uh, at the time where the government is supposed to form the security arrangements and all the institutional reforms, and that was supposed to be taking like 8 months, and then after that, then we would have the transitional period, which is supposed to be for 3 years. So that was the time which was supposed to begin in 2020, where the unity government was supposed to be formed, and that brought in all the warring functions like the South Sudan, the SPLM in government, the SPLM-IO, the former political detainees, the South Sudan Opposition Alliance, and all other political parties. Um, and we've seen that both the pre-transitional period and even the transitional period have been extended so many times. So the transitional period is mainly that temporary period where the country is supposed to be governed and then taken into a stable and peaceful democratic state where we would have elections, and then the established government abolished. I mean, the one that was supposed to be governing in that period would be abolished after an election is formed. So that was basically the transitional period that was stated in the agreement that was signed in 2018 in Addis Ababa.
Right. And so, in a nutshell, the transitional period is a power sharing arrangement that is supposed to lead to an election and permanent systems like the permanent constitution and stuff like that.
Exactly, that's right. Because when we look at the structure of the government that is in place today in South Sudan, you'd realize that it's a very weird and I mean, a structure that does not exist in a normal state. And the peace agreement actually crafted that structure so it could actually bring in on board like almost all the warring parties, those who feel dissatisfied and who feel they were maybe removed from the 2013 cabinet reshuffle, so that this agreement bring them all on board, and then they will be working together in order to take the country into a democratic state or level. So yeah, that's basically it. So it's about the power sharing period where all the functions were supposed to be brought into government and work into taking the country into a stable state. Yeah, you're
Right.
right. Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think probably just something to add on to what you have already said is that the delays and extensions that we have seen over the years do affect people's trust of this very peace agreement, but also does affect, I think, services and even like security. And I think we have seen that over the years. Because, like, now we're in 2025, and ideally, the the 8 months and the 3 years for the transitional period have ended a long time ago, but we
Right.
haven't seen any election or some of the institutions that are supposed to have been rebuilt within this period.
That's right. That's totally right. I mean, you know, and in most cases, I always argue that the people who drafted that peace agreement and its content, I feel like there was like an intentional plan to just make the country remain stagnant in this way, because you can create a government that actually brings all these people, and then also you task them with the responsibility of, I mean, taking the country into I mean into an elections, and then in order for it to have a new government, because there's so many people who feel that uh, in other words, so many people who are actually today in the government, they were only brought into the government because of the peace agreement. But if we look at their capability or their ability to actually get into a government through an electoral process, most of them will not get there. So when you give these people the power to extend the transitional period, obviously, because they know that once we go into an elections where people are elected, they probably will miss out. So they will have the deliberate move to actually make an extension in order to prolong their stay in power. And I think that is the weakness of the peace agreement. And that is actually hurting South Sudanese so much. It's hurting them a lot.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I definitely agree with you with on that. Yeah, the,
Yeah.
there are actually recent reports that do suggest that the presidency has sat in a recent meeting and that the presidency has ruled out any more extensions of the transitional period, which I think is good news. And at the same time, maybe not good news, but I think the the reports circulating around suggest that the presidency is pushing to have an election in December 2026. And I'm just maybe to get more from you who follow these things very closely. What exactly? did the presidency decide in the recent meeting? And also, what message are they trying to send to the public or even the international community? Because for all these years, it has been the presidency, like, let's extend. And now all of a sudden, it's like, no, let's have these elections.
Right. And Patrick, if you may recall,
Hmm.
the last time when uh, the transitional period was extended, the president came out and say this would be the final time for them to extend the elections, and they won't do it again. That is what they said. And just last week on Wednesday, there was a meeting, as they said. I think that was when on Friday the minister in the office of the president, called Africano Monday, came out and he gave a briefing on what actually transpired between the presidency. They call it a presidency, but there was one prominent person who was missing there, and that was Machar. So in the presidency, they meant the president of the Republic of South Sudan, and then the all other four vice president, excluding Machar. And also in that meeting were some of the prominent senior leaders to the signatories of the peace agreement, members of the former detainees, the South Sudan Opposition Alliance, and all other functions that were part of the peace agreement. So they had a meeting, and in that meeting, they agreed that the country would not extend the transitional period anymore. They would actually not postpone elections. They would stand with the decision that the country will go for polls in December 22nd, 2026, that is next year. And they said that the country will go to these elections without some of the most prominent elements stated in the peace agreement, which suggests that these elements should be first met before the country gets into an election. And one of them is a permanent constitution. The second of it is the population census. So the presidency and then the senior leadership of some of the signatories to the peace agreement, they apparently agreed that they will take the country into an elections without the permanent constitution and without even carrying population census. So that's what they agreed on Wednesday. And the nation was briefed on that on Friday, I think yesterday or so, about the meeting that was held by the president. So that's what they agreed on, that regardless of the country not having a permanent constitution and even not having done population census, the country is heading towards elections, or the country is going for an elections next year in December. That's what they agreed on. And that meeting was done in absence of Machar, who was the most prominent signatory to it. There was one guy called Stephen Parr. He is actually one of the guys who leads the SPLMIO function that actually broke out from the mainstream. But still, there are so many people who stand with Machar, and they actually distant themselves away from that meeting that was held by the presidency, and they say that's not their stand, because a country, they can head for an elections without a permanent constitution and without the population census being carried out, because these two elements are really really very prominent for any country to head toward an election. They are very very uh, these are interesting things that first needs to be done before an election is done, just like stated in the peace agreement. But unfortunately, the government and then the presidency, I mean, agreed that even without this being done, they will still go for an election. So that was the meeting that was held on Wednesday by the presidency and some of the top senior leadership of the signatories to the peace agreement.
Right. And so basically, as South Sudanese, we should not expect to see a census conducted leading up to these elections in December 2026. And uh, we also should forget about a permanent constitution for now.
Yeah, that's
And
what they said.
right. And so this this like agreement is a form of like the government coming up to show commitment uh, to holding elections on time. But I really do think that it so much appears like a facade because the same people had enough time over the years to have conducted a census and to have done all the processes required for South Sudan to have a permanent constitution, ideally by now. Don't
Right.
you think so?
They really had so much time. I think uh, I just have the feeling that most of the steps taken by the government to extend these, I mean, these are all deliberate efforts. They really don't want the country to have a permanent constitution because they know um, the importance of that, and they know how that would actually limit their powers as leaders, and they know how this is going to abolish the government that was established through the peace agreement. So every single step, I feel it was a planned kind of thing because I mean, the transitional period was supposed to end in 2023 on February 22nd. So you can imagine from 23 and 2025, we're like 2 years, uh, and the government still can't get like a permanent constitution and then conduct population census. So I feel this was a deliberate move by the leadership of that is in the country just to make it hard to attain a permanent constitution, but also carry population census. And yeah, that's my feeling. I feel it's a deliberate move, but that's a dangerous one. I feel it's really dangerous move to go for an election without permanent constitution and conducting population census. Yeah,
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah. I mean,
right.
the the idea of making changes to the peace deal, the peace agreement, and then excluding some of the most crucial parts, I think it's a risky thing to do.
It
And
is.
and I know like uh, aside from the constitution and the elections, in particular the census that ideally should have been done leading up to the elections. What are other changes from this meeting that they suggest to make to the peace deal, aside from the constitution and the census, that they think are necessary?
I think some of the things that they agree to go on without them is the reforms, the institutional reforms, because as I said before, that before the elections, we're supposed to have a permanent constitution. We're
Hmm.
supposed to have a population census conducted, and we're also supposed to have some kind of institutional reforms carried out. And in this case, we have institutions like the national, I mean, the electoral commissions. So these are some of the institutions that are supposed to be reformed so it can have the capacity to actually handle a national election. But these things are not done. So when we look at the impact of all these excluded as the country heads towards an election, I feel it's so huge. Because one, if we're not going to have a permanent constitution, what does it imply? What does it mean if we go for an elections and then have a government established and then we have a permanent constitution later on met post elections? What does it mean? One, this means that if a government is formed, it doesn't matter if it is the SPLM-IO that forms the government or the SPLM, the SPLM mainstream or any other political party forms the government, and there's no constitution. So the government of that day will probably have the upper hands of manipulating the constitution. They can have it, and therefore wish to, if they want to eliminate term limits from there, if they want to create a permanent constitution where there is no term limits, there is no age limit, if they want to create a constitution where the president has absolute powers, he appoints and his powers are unchecked. So that is the problem. We're not going to change it because the government of that day will have the powers to influence it. That is the impact of going into an elections without a permanent constitution. The impact of going into an elections without conducting population census. One, what is the use of having the population of the country determined demographics is very important in determining results of an election. One, it informs us of the voter register. It informs us how many people are in the country, and therefore, um, when population census is carried out, it also informs the entire electoral constitution to actually uh, create constituencies, because we know that we have this number of people in this place, and therefore, when we have this number of people, this specific place qualifies to be a constituency, and therefore we should have a representative in the parliament that is to represent this number of people. But if we don't have that established, so how are we going to determine the number of constituencies that we are going to be electing in 2026? But also the importance of having a population census is such that in case the country goes towards an election, and at some point maybe those who are aspiring to be the leaders, or those candidates in the presidency who are actually contesting for the presidency, if one of them, or even those who are going to be elected as governors, if any of them feels that they are not being they have been rigged in the elections, and their evidence are supposed to be based on the numbers. They would say these are the numbers of people, or maybe we have this number of people manipulated. They are not actually there, but these are ghost voters, because we have the electoral commission, the population census. We have this number of people who are supposed to be voting for us, but where have we gotten this much number? These are ghost them, and therefore they will have like the evidence to support themselves. That is the importance of population census. So not having all these means that it's going to be very hard to actually go into an election. But also, one of the other element that the presidency has actually decided to just ignore it's the institutional reforms. That is one of the things that's supposed to be done. So we do have institutions like the electoral commissions that is supposed to be reformed such that it act independently. It is given the capacity to actually handle national elections without influence of the executive or any other branch of the government. So if all these reforms are not done, so it is very, very dangerous to go for an elections next year. And these are the things that the government has just thrown them into the dustbin, and they say this doesn't matter, and these don't matter actually, and then they've agreed to go for an election without all these prominent elements that are supposed to be done before an election. Yeah, so it's unfortunate.
Definitely is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
I think I 100% agree with your point of view. And
Hmm.
uh, and honestly, like you, I do agree with these critics online who say that revising the peace agreement instead of completing it could weaken safeguards that were
Hmm.
meant to, protect the citizens and prevent a return to war, basically, for South Sudan. And I think really what you've said fits nicely into that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But also I feel like, for us as South Sudanese, I feel that the more this goes on and important provisions of the peace agreement are delayed or left out or not implemented at all, I think it makes us feel cheated.
That's right. I think majority of South Sudanese seems to be really excited to go for an elections, because this is a country where almost 90% of the people have never casted a vote. I mean, if at all there are people who participated in any maybe electoral process, it's the ones those who were there in 2000. I mean, those who were 18 and above in 2010, and also maybe those who participated in the referendum. But apart from that, we didn't have any other electoral process that was carried out. So I feel so many South Sudanese are excited, and they really don't care what is going to be the impact of going for an election in 2026. So they just feel desperate, and they feel this is the only way we can have change if we go to an election. But they don't look at the way how the country is heading towards an election. So yeah, but also, and I think this is really a very bad move, and it's a bad one to many South Sudanese. Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I
Right.
think it is. Yeah.
Right. Mhm.
Would be nice for us to see the 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 peace agreement implemented to the letter.
Exactly.
I think it would be good for us as a country, but it so appears that maybe to some extent there is a lack of political will, especially amongst our leaders and parties to the peace agreement.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is
I
definitely lack of political will from the leaders. I mean, most of them are just reluctant. They really are very reluctant in taking the country into the next step of the peace agreement. They just seem stagnant and have no idea of what next to do. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, they do. I I genuinely do not believe that they do not know what to do.
Right.
I genuinely do believe that they do know what to do, but they are more focused on keeping themselves in power.
Mm.
And so that takes priority
Right.
over, for example, anything around implementation of the peace agreement.
That's true. Hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
And speaking of that, um, so I think some members of the SPLM-IO, Dr. Riek Machari's party, have come out to reject the findings or the outcome of the presidency's recent meeting.
Right.
I remember like a couple of them were like, the meeting was not inclusive, which I think is something you mentioned when we
Right.
started this conversation, and that they have been excluded because Dr. Riek Machar is under house arrest up to now and also on trial. Uh, like, in your own opinion, why do you think the SPLM-IO is rejecting the outcomes of the presidency? Although I would think this is probably something they have always wanted, to have an election.
Yeah. Sometimes politics can be a little bit tricky because when we look at the peace agreement, I mean, the most focal person to this peace agreement, apart from President Kiir, I mean, we can obviously see it's Machar. Even all those who came to be the political, I mean, former detainees, the South Sudan Opposition Alliance, most of these people in the onset of the conflict that happened in 2013, most of them were all under Machar, right? So, and therefore, I think it will be like it won't really make any sense if we are talking about making any reforms, if you're talking about having an elections in 2026, if you're talking about making an amendments to the peace agreement, if you're talking about that, I mean, it will look more of a comedy if we don't bring in Machar. Because what is the peace agreement without Machar? What is having an election in 2026? It's not that I'm supporting Machar. I'm not. I'm not his supporter, and I don't uh, uh, buy his. I mean, his politics at some point. But for us to have really, I mean, peace that makes sense, we should always have him on the table. We should have. We should consider the level of influence that he has on the opposition. He commands. I mean, if not the largest opposition, it commands the largest opposition, I would say, in the entire country. Don't even bring in the SPLM, I mean, the South Sudan Opposition Alliance or the former detainees, but Machar alone and his followers, they command, I mean, he commands a lot. And therefore, if we are talking about any peace, eh, we should always bring Machar in. And I feel that these SPLM-IO guys who came out and distanced themselves from the meeting that was held on Wednesday, I think they were within their right. Because even the peace agreement alone, the peace agreement stated that the presidency cannot make any decision without consultation. If we look at the structure of the peace agreement, that there is not supposed to be any decision made within the presidency without consultation. And that one they have to consult. And one of the focal person that needs to be consulted is the first vice president. And up to now, we don't have any person who occupies that position who we would say, since the constitution say we should consult the first vice president, so since we have this person Machar's replacement, we have consulted him. We don't have that. That position right now is vacant. So who would we say then we have consulted as the first vice president of the country? No one. And therefore, I feel those people from the SPLMIO, they have the right to reject it because they were the most important part of the peace agreement. And therefore, any decision made without them would remain null and void. And that's what they are saying, right? So for them to have like a very comprehensive a decision that at least it's inclusive, then Machar should be brought in. He is under house arrest. I mean, he's going under a trial. He is not found guilty yet, so he can still be consulted if I was killed, right? Or we could even just let him bring a representative and just who can speak in his behalf, and maybe someone who can bring in as I mean appear like Machar's face in the meeting, but there was no one of that kind. So these people probably they were right to say that they're not part of that meeting and they disagree with whatsoever outcome that was met from that meeting. So they are right, according to me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the whole idea of their exclusion from that meeting was unfair, given that the SPLM-IO party is probably the major party after the SPLM in government.
That's
And so
right.
it was only fair that they needed to have been involved in such a significant meeting where major decisions like those were made. I think it needed to have been done with them, at
Hmm.
least consulted, or at least, in participation. But I would also think that excluding a major signatory to the peace agreement like the SPLM-IO does threaten the legitimacy of the peace agreement, as well as its implementation. But I think it does undermine the legitimacy of the elections in December 2026, should they actually happen.
That's right. Uh, I've been following Machar, and he has really been advocating for. I mean, to have an elections when we have um, a free and I mean like a space, a political space that can accommodate all people of all kind of opinions. I mean, if you don't agree with the president, and you can still thrive in that environment. That is what he has been asking for. We can't go for an elections when we are so much bitter about the opposition, and then we feel we can have like a free and credible elections. I mean, of course, just like you've said that going for an elections without the SPLMI, or I mean, it's really doesn't make any sense. So I would love to see that Machar is being part of that meeting, or any other person maybe that he sends to be part of that meeting, so that it brings in that structure of the peace agreement, so we can see that his views are being represented, or he's being represented in that meeting, and also someone can have maybe said what Machar thinks about that. So, but just going for that, I mean, going for an election without him, honestly, it threatens the peace agreement, just like you've mentioned, and that puts the country at I mean, another risk of getting back into war. Of course, if we go for an elections uh, without Machar and is still under trial, maybe they will say, and we never know when this trial will end. We might even have it pushed until next year. So we could even see that this is I mean, the way how they are rushing towards it could be a technical criteria of eliminating him from the ballot. That could be also another thing that they're looking at, because maybe they want to extend the trial to go, and they would say he can go for an election because he's still under trial. So that would be like a kind of a legal argument to actually eliminate him from the ballot. So I think they are very right when they're worried about that, because they might see this as a political uh, uh, tactic to actually just eliminate him from the ballot. So when you see the SPLMIO guys coming out and disagreeing with what the presidency said, then of course they might be looking at it from that lenses. that these people are trying to be rushy with this process because they want to eliminate Machar from the ballot, and that could be true. So, but yeah, that's unfortunate that this might be the scenario that they actually the presidency or the SPLM in government is thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely. And I also feel that the nature in which this process leading up to the elections has started in a very not inclusive manner already is starting to feel like it has thrown out of the window any hopes of a free and fair elections should actually elections happen.
Exactly. Yes, because if you have to think, I mean, you know, an electoral commission of any country always have their own roadmap toward an elections. So they might come out and say from January to maybe February, this is where we will have all political parties maybe bring in their what do you call it? I mean, do like go and seek for signatures for nomination around the country, and that might be the time when Machar is still under the trial. And they would say this is the time when each and every candidate would be cleared by the electoral commission, and that if you're not cleared, you're not going to be part of it. They put deadline maybe April, and then that is it. And then after that, we'll have the campaign period where you traverse through the country and go and do campaign. So if maybe by mid next year this trial is not done and the electoral commission sets a deadlines that this would be the time, maybe in July would be the time when all candidates aspiring to be presidents or governors should be cleared by the electoral commission, and anyone who's not cleared by that due date is not going to be on the ballot. So we're seeing Machar being eliminated from there, obviously. So I mean, this could be really a very tactical move done by the SPLM government just to get rid of him from the ballot. Yeah, and we might even see this trial being extended. I mean, for the very longest, we might see it even extending until mid next year. And since the Machar is under trial, they will have the argument that he's not qualified to be uh, I mean, on the ballot. So yeah, that could be another possibility. Mhm.
Absolutely. I actually thought so too. I
Right.
thought that this was a very tactical move by the presidency that actually will work in favor of President Salva Kiir.
Right.
She did continue in that nature. Very tactical.
Right.
Because
That's.
basically, by bringing the timeline down and
Mhm.
fixing it there while there's trial going on and the future of Dr. Riek Machar is not yet clear, you can easily basically organize a shaky election and all of a sudden, you have yourself declared as the winner and as the president.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that could be true. But let's keep watching. But yes,
absolutely.
if we have this trial continued, and maybe we're likely even to have the entire court. Maybe um, they might have a break. They would say, okay, since it's a festive season, we're going to take like maybe 3 weeks without the sitting. We're not coming back for the uh, because of the Christmas or the festive period, we will resume next year. So, and then from next year, then we will have it like if we are going to have it maybe in a weekly or bi-weekly phases. Though obviously, we are going to get into July or something of that kind. And if the Electoral Commission sets the deadlines, so they are likely to eliminate Machar from that. They are likely. And that's why Machar is worried. That's why the people allied to him are very worried about it. So,
Yeah.
but yes, we hope that it does. That is not the what they meant, because it will take the country in a different way. I mean, it won't be embraced by everyone. Many people will be angry about that. Yeah,
Yeah. Hopefully,
because that would mean that if we have an elections conducted without Machar, because Machar is only being perceived right now as someone who is legal in the government because of that the revitalized peace agreement. The peace agreement recognized him as the first vice president, and he is in the government on that basis. So if we have in next year in 2026 an election done, and we have a new government established, let's say SPLM in government, the SPLM mainstream wins it, and then they form a government. And when we have the transitional government of national unity abolished, which has Machar as the vice president, and if, since we have a new government, that government established by the peace agreement is not longer going to be existing, it's not going to be recognized. So, where is Machar going to be placed in the political atmosphere of the country? He's not going to be a first vice president, he's not going to be anywhere. He's going, I mean, it's going to put him in the political exile. I mean, it might be outside the politics of the country. So when we look at it at that lenses, then we're seeing a very dangerous move done being done by the presidency or by the SPLM mainstream. Yeah.
Yeah. They
Mhm.
are playing a long game.
A long one. Right.
Yeah. To keep this guy out of the game for
Right.
good.
For good. Yeah. And I mean, like, you know, I think I'm just now collecting some kind of thoughts that I've never thought of. because because I mean, if I mean these whole things, like if you bring them together, it creates another different perception. Because as I said that if we have like Machar eliminated from the politics of the country through this way that they're trying to do, and then we have a government established without permanent constitution, or just like maybe what Dr. Luca Byung said, suggested, one of these scholars who said that maybe the country should go for a partial election. If we
Mhm.
have that, maybe that the legislature, members of parliament are only appointed, and then these members of parliament can be used maybe to extend, since we don't have a permanent constitution, the members of parliament elected maybe that time can be used to actually extend the term limit or eliminate it, so we can have the president of the country without any terms, and then he has the power. Since the powers are not limited by the constitution, he has the right to bring whosoever he wants to be his replacement, to bring on the vice president position. I mean, that's like we're going to have a very weird kind of government in the country existing, that is going to be based on maybe uh, ethnicity or dynasty, where we feel people who we are close to should be the one taking over power. I mean, the whole thing just doesn't make sense, and it's going to create some kind of anarchy in the country. We're not really going to have a very peaceful country. When you collect all these elements and just bring them together and start analyzing, it creates a very scary image. It
Absolutely.
really does. Yeah.
Yeah. It
Very
is
scary.
very scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
My
does.
hope is that we do not get to that point
Right.
where we return back to a war.
Hmm.
That would be a disaster. So the SPLM-IO argues that you cannot amend the peace deal without their participation, since they are a major signatory. From your view, and because you have looked at the peace agreement very closely, is it legally and politically acceptable to change the peace agreement without the SPLM-IO and Dr. Riek Machar in
It is
participation?
not. It is not acceptable. I mean, it's not even about amending the peace agreement, but a mere appointment, especially in the presidency. It's not supposed to be done without the consent of one of the component of the presidency, whether being the vice president or any of the vice president or the first vice president. But we have seen that there are not once, not twice, but so many times that the president does an appointment without even Machar knowing about it, and that is being embraced. And they go, they move on, he walks away with it. No one's arguing about it. So it's not just about amending the constitution. Any single slight decision that the president or any single of them, whether being the president or one of the vice president or Machar himself, wants it to be done, he's supposed to do it in consultation with the other members of the presidency, the president, and they should have like a consensus, come out with a unilateral decision and say this is our stand. We all agree, and this should be leave alone just that bigger part of amending the peace agreement. A mere decision about appointment of a minister should have been done in consultation with all the presidency and also the signatories to the peace agreement. But that has not been done. Yes, the meeting that happened recently was done, and the four vice presidents were in attendance. The president himself was in attendance. The signatories to the peace agreement were also in attendance. And then, but there was one person missing, which was very prominent, and that was my child. So that alone is against the peace agreement. That alone is against the peace agreement. The exclusion of my child in that meeting, it's a violation of the peace agreement, and therefore any decision or any outcome that they came out from that meeting is not going to be binding. It's not going to be in line with the peace agreement, which had actually suggested that they make consultation. And unfortunately, my child was not consulted, and he was not part of that. Yeah, so it was illegal to have that agreement to do the extension of to have an election next year without my child. So it was against the peace agreement.
Yeah, that is quite interesting
Yeah,
that the president knew and understood that all signatories must agree to amendments such as those agreed in the recent meeting of the presidency. However, with all that information, they went ahead to sit for such a meeting and agree on such outcomes without the the presence of Dr. Riek Machar. And I think this really goes back to what we were discussing earlier, that this really appears like a very deliberate, long game decision.
hmm,
It's more like playing chess.
right.
And this is like one of those moves that is just aimed at taking this guy out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it appears so. It really does. And yeah, my child, really, you can't make any decisions right now about the country. And I'm not saying that he is such a powerful guy, but just to be in line with what the peace agreement says, we should bring him on, right? Bring him on board and ask his consent because he commands the major opposition of the country. So majority of the guys who are anti-Kir, anti the SPLM mainstream government are allied to Machar, and therefore you can't make any, move without him being part of it. So that doesn't really make any sense to me. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And also, like, making really such a move, like major decisions, could trigger major disputes and even war.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's that's really that's correct. And yeah, we have seen like fighting emerging due to very slight decisions, not these major ones. So this is one of the uh, decisions that might actually take the country back. So if they intend to exclude Machar, if that is their intention, then I think they are risking taking back the country into war.
Yeah.
Because
Speaking,
my child might not be, he might be under house arrest, but there are people out there that are still allied to him, and they can cause any havoc in the country. They can do that even without my child being part of it.
yeah,
Mhm.
that is so true. And
Yeah,
actually, speaking of that, Riyad Machar is on trial over the Nasir incident that happened, I think, early this year.
right.
And the prosecutors are using the idea of command responsibility to link Dr. Yak Machar to the killings that happened in the Nasir incident, even without direct orders from Dr. Yak Machar himself. What exactly does that mean?
Like, when I look at the charges made against Machar, especially the one on murder. And there are people who argue that he actually is the one that he murdered the general Maturo. Yeah, and when I look at that, and I was wondering, what does what is the legal definition of murder? Perhaps does it? I mean, like, is it? Do you have to get direct into like contact maybe with someone? Is that what the courts define as a murder, or through a command or some kind of authority? That is what they call it. Because um, the time when the incident in Nasir happened, I think my child wasn't there. He was in Juba, and they brought in charges about murder. I mean, they could say about the treason, but the one of murder, I don't really think that is legally uh, I mean, a charge that should be made against him because he wasn't there. In fact, when I heard from some of the witnesses, they said, in fact, my child was trying to rescue the general who got killed there, but then the people, those white army generals as well, they disrespected my child's order of actually bringing back that general. They killed him, and over again, Machar has always refused that. He denied that the White Army is not actually an affiliation of the Esplemayo, and also the leadership of the White Army have said that they are not affiliated to the Esplemayo. So when you're talking about murder, Machar committing murder, I'm yet to hear from maybe a verdict passed by the court if at all they are going to find him guilty of murder, and we see what argument are they going to give, or on what basis do they consider him a murderer or someone who has participated in the killing of the general. I'm yet to see that that verdict passed by 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 the courts. Yeah, but speaking of murder, I don't think if what was done in Nasir can be really um, something that is equal to murder done by Machar, because he wasn't there, right?
R-
Unless I mean, maybe the court has its own definition of what constitute a murder. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
I mean, I have watched a couple of crime movies
Right.
and TV shows,
Right.
and I think at least I have understood from some of those shows that you can be found guilty of murder even without necessarily being directly
Involved.
involved in killing, let's say, a person. Could be because you were the one that hired the person,
Right.
and maybe you're even in a different country, but
Right.
the orders came from you.
Right.
And I think in that case, the court can find you liable, or you can be charged and probably even convicted
Right.
of murder. Could be
Yeah.
first degree, second degree, depending.
Yeah.
But
That's yeah. That's why I said I'm yet to wait from the courts, because there's also an evidence of
mhm,
my child actually giving command for the late general before he was killed to be actually airlifted to Juba. So that was also another evidence. So we're having these two contradicting evidences here of him actually giving a command for the general to be brought back so he won't be killed. And then there was also another argument that he actually gave the orders for the general to be killed. So we're seeing two contrasting evidences here that the court will have to wait for the courts to pass a judgment on that. Yeah.
absolutely. And
Hmm.
Emma, what I am struggling to understand in this
Right.
whole thing is what exactly does command responsibility mean? Because that is what the prosecutors are using to link Dr. Riek Machar to the killings in the Nasir incident, even though they were not direct orders from Machar.
Mhm. I think maybe the command responsibility might be coming from the fact that Machar holds a very, very prominent position, and perhaps there are people. In fact, when we look at the trial, Machar is not the primary suspect. Instead, the primary, in fact, according to the list, the order of the names, Machar is on number five suspect. So when you look at that order, so that means the primary suspects, starting from that order, maybe are the ones that are closely linked to that. So we do have someone like the Minister of Petroleum, the former Minister of Petroleum, Paul Kang, who is the primary suspect in that case, in that trial. So this is a guy who is close to Machar. So perhaps they might feel that because he is close to Machar and Machar is his senior, and therefore he might have that command or that like might get from Machar and therefore extend it towards the field. So but the commander responsibility of committing that murder, I think, can best be defined by the courts. And just like I said, we're yet to wait what verdict the court is probably going to pass. And until that time, probably we won't be able to come up with a very clear uh, argument of how that should be or what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. We
Right.
definitely look forward to seeing what the
Yeah,
courts
yeah, but I've
maybe.
seen but I've seen so many leaders of many countries, people who have
Mhm,
not even participated directly in killing. For instance, in 2007, there was an election that was held in Kenya, and then in that after that elections, the country had violence that led to killings and uh, people were massacred, and that has made actually the current president of Kenya and the former president Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta were taken to the International Court of Justice. They were taken and they were prosecuted there. And one of the charges was that they committed murder because and they were not even directly participating. They did not participate directly in those killings, but because they feel the people that actually did the direct murder, they received the commands from them because they hold these high positions. One of them is the deputy president. I mean, before they were actually elected into the presidency, they were very prominent people in the opposition who had very huge followings. And therefore, there was this belief that the people who actually participated in the direct murder of the citizen, they received commands from these people. And this actually brings in the argument that if you are someone who has authority, so you should be very responsible in how you actually command the people around you, because
mhm.
anything that the people around you will do, it will come back to you as someone who is above them. People will
Right.
definitely know that you're the one who who actually directed those commands. And yeah, that makes it very important that if you hold such prominent positions, so you should always be very careful about the people, the act the people around you commit. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And and I think that even in the case of my child, this is very interesting because, for example, just building on what you said, there are
Mhm.
even no any direct orders from Riek Machar. And I was trying to understand, like, what does actually command responsibility mean? And here it says that uh, command responsibility is a legal doctrine that
Mhm.
holds military and civilian leaders accountable for the actions of their subordinates,
Right.
especially in cases of war crimes and violations of international law.
Hmm.
So technically, there needn't to be an order from you for you to be
Right.
held accountable.
But that also makes it like very hard because I mean the people around me might have their own motives, right?
Yeah,
So it really doesn't make any sense if anyone who subscribes to my politics, to my ideologies, and if they decide to go and do their own thing out there, I should be the one like charged with the crime they've committed. I feel this is legally unfair. I mean, for this to be done because just like the case of my child, there wasn't really any direct command from him. He didn't do that. But because people believe he holds a prominent position, commander in chief of the SPLM IO armies and those things, and they believe that the people who actually committed the crime, because they are his subordinates, perhaps should be also charged with that, which is I feel that is legally unfair. It's really really unfair. But
Yeah,
yeah, maybe if that's what the courts decides and that's what the kind of definition they've come up with, then yes, let's wait and see what is going to come out from that.
yeah.
Yeah,
And honestly, for me, like, I genuinely look forward to seeing what is going to be the verdict of this case and how exactly
right.
the prosecutors are actually going to realistically link Machar to the killings in the Nasir incident. But I think, honestly, that is something that maybe we'll learn more in the
Right.
coming
Yes,
days and weeks and perhaps
exactly.
months. But I
Yeah.
think one thing that is very clear is that actions such as these, for example, the ongoing trial of Dr. Riek Machar and the recent meeting of the presidency do affect whether the opposition leaders in South Sudan feel safe and comfortable to compete in an election in 2026 fairly.
Right. Yeah, I think that's and even those guys who agree uh, to the belief that the country should go for an election, I think they should really be very worried about it, unless they are not seeking for any electoral positions. Because how do you really go for an elections in such a country where you don't have any uh, constitution that actually guides uh, the process of the election? How are you going to get into an election? And I'm still wondering because some of the people who actually were part of that meeting, these are people who I respect them so much, but unfortunately they had to fall into that political deception that I mean it's okay to get for an election next year. So but for the opposition, as the country agrees and they finally decide that they're going to be an election, I think they shouldn't be really excited about it. There's nothing to be excited about being in the opposition unless they want to disown their political outfits and then go and join SPLM. And if they are interested in vying for other position, they go under SPLM mainstream. But apart from that, I don't see any 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 I mean possibility of someone going into this election as an opposition candidate in whatsoever position, in the presidency or in the gubernatorial positions, or if you're intending to be a member of parliament, it's gonna be hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree. Yeah, yeah. And honestly, like, when I came across the reports of basically the the slated election for December 2026, I was like, are we realistically ready for an election in
See,
2026?
look at this. Like
Yeah.
in Uganda is heading towards an election on 15th of January. But you could see right from last year, early this year, uh,
Hmm.
you can easily see that there is an election going to happen next year in January. The way how the country has been preparing, you see that all the opposition parties are actually gearing up towards 2026. You can see that the country is on campaign mode. And you can easily see that you can see people going on the national TV talking about it. Lots of
Hmm.
ads on TVs about these slated election happening next year and all this kind of stuff. Kenya is heading towards an election in 2027, but
Yeah.
the country, when you look at the political, the temperature, political temperature in the country, you feel that the country is heading towards an election maybe tomorrow. And
Hmm.
in South Sudan, the country is heading towards an elections in 2026 December, but there's no
Yeah.
any single sign that there is an election going to be. No preparation. Not the electoral commission is sleeping. I mean, opposition parties are not even coming out. No candidate is showing up. Nothing happening in the country. That
Yeah.
tells you a lot about. I don't know what kind of elections we're heading, but let's see what's going to happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Genuinely, and this is my opinion, but I really do think that South Sudan is not ready for elections in December 2026. Because when you look at the peace agreement, the 2018 peace agreement, we have so many tasks that are
Right.
not completed. So many of them. For example, uh, we do not have the unified security forces up to
Right.
now. That is still pending.
Right.
We do not have a permanent constitution up to now. We have not done a census. And refugees have not returned back to South Sudan yet.
Right.
And just like you have said, we are not seeing any full scale election preparations going on in the country, whether it be from the government or otherwise. It's
Right.
not there. And yet, in the recent meeting, the presidency sat and agreed that no, we need to have an election in
Mhm.
December 2026. I feel that that is impractical.
It is. It is because look, the creation of the unified forces that was um, that was supposed to be done in the pre-transitional period, in the 8 months after the signing of the peace agreement, but that has never been achieved up to now, right? And just like I said before, that the last time the country had census, I think it was in 2008, when the country was heading toward the 2010 elections. And right from there, there has been series of conflicts, civil wars that erupted in the country. So many people fled the country. Majority of them are living as refugees. And from that year up to now, there's been a consistent increase. People have been producing, others dying. So there is perhaps maybe increase or decrease in the population due to the civil war. And therefore, we don't have any clear demographics of the country. We don't have any clear number of the population of the country right now. So I mean, like, to be very serious, how are we going to head towards an elections in this manner? We don't know the number of people that are living in this country. We don't know how many people are going to be voting in this election. How are we going to? Perhaps we are going to have ghost names being brought into these elections, and people are just going to. It's weird. Like if you look at the entire thing, it doesn't really make any sense. It's so weird.
It
So
is.
in practical, just like you've said, we shouldn't really focus on having an elections, according to my own opinion, next year. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
unrealistic.
And even if we are to have the elections, I doubt that I doubt that the elections would be free and fair.
It won't be.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't.
No.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we we have insecurity in a lot of the parts of the country up to now. And if you are having a general election in 2026, like the presidency has suggested, how are candidates going to traverse the
Yeah.
country
Across the
to
country.
campaign and reach the electorate?
Look, and the most scary thing. Look, we still do have like holdout groups, right? These are
Yes.
people who don't want to be part of the peace agreement. There right now we have the NAS, the National
Yeah.
Salvation Front. We have other the group to Paul Malone, one. We do have other major guys that are still out there, likes of Pagana Mung, the former SG of SPLM Party. They are still out there. The
Yeah.
likes of this guy who uh, um, William is called Nyal Deng Nyal, who recently defected from the SPLM party and is now working with the UPA, the newly the associate of all the other holdout groups. So they are still out there, and we are trying to have an elections. And then if you want to be the president and you're going to be moving across the country trying to sell your manifesto, and most of these people in most cases like they attack these roads, right? How are you going to be
Yeah.
traversing across the country? They will kill you.
Of
Honestly, like
course.
people will be killed. Right? So
Yeah.
why not first bring these holdout groups, make them part of to be part of the process, so they feel safe, so that we can have an inclusive kind of a process where everyone feels is part of. so they won't be out there terrorizing people when you doing the elections. I mean, it's more of putting the country in more risk. I mean, candidates are going to be at risk, even citizens are going to be at risk. We will see instances where polling stations being disturbed, even attacked by these other groups. It's going to happen. So,
Absolutely.
it's really unfortunate that people don't look at it that way. They just want a way of consolidating themselves in power, and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Right.
agree with you. And
Mhm.
honestly, we we do have very significant gaps in security, our institutions, our census, and even funding. That is something that is not talked about.
Exactly.
But we have lots of gaps in these areas. And I think the emphasis on just having the election in 2026 does not necessarily mean it's going to be a credible election or a fair one or a free one. But neither does it also mean that necessarily it's going to end the war, which is why it's always important to engage everyone.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's right. I think that issue of the funding is one of the most important one,
yeah,
because I'm still wondering how this government is going to have an election. Like, how they're going to secure the fund. The fundings for this election, because um, I don't think if there was in the budget that was passed, if there was some kind of a allocation given towards an election. I don't think so, and we are still having a section of civil servants even running for almost 9 months or so without getting paid. So I'm wondering where this government is going to get this money in months, in a period of months to, I mean, do the whole process. The government need to secure ballot papers. They need to employ like some officers in all polling stations, and then if I don't, but I don't think they have a system right now. They don't have any system like servers or kind of thing that they don't have that at the moment. So we probably have like a manual kind of election where we have it today. It will take us
yeah,
maybe 1 month or 2 weeks to come up with the results. So it's really going to be hard. It's
yeah,
hard, and it's just hard coordinating the whole thing. Look at that part of coordinating the elections. I mean, in all the constituency from one country, that part of I mean, it's just it's hard, man. It's really.
yeah,
I don't think it's going to happen something very in a good way, because that issue of the funding, it's a very important one. But
yeah,
I don't see this government having the capacity to run a very credible election. I don't really.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, things happen. Perhaps this is our first time. Some of us will buy the belief that this is our first time, so they'll be looking for something that is perfect. So just start with that. But yeah, still, at least we should have the basics. To have if we are starting, we should at least have the basics. But with our government, we don't even see that those basics are still not there. We're not seeing them, right?
yeah.
So it's hard.
It
It's a very
is.
situation.
Yeah. And I feel like this is really a conversation that needs to be had
Mhm.
again and again, um, because I genuinely do think that South Sudan does need to go into an election. That is for sure.
Right.
But I also understand that a bad election can be worse than an election that is delayed but well prepared.
That's true.
Yeah,
That is right. It's
especially if we go into an election in 2026 without some of the major parties taking part in it, like for example the SPLM-IO. I think that would be risky and would maybe even like throw the country back into violence and deepen
that's
just
right.
mistrust altogether.
That's right. That's why I said, going towards an election in 2026 would be a suicide for the entire country. I mean, it's really it's really is because without all these prominent elements that are required, you know, would be really just deceiving ourselves that we're going to have a credible election. We are not going to have that at all. We are not going to have it at all. And just like you've said, it's good to have a delayed elections than having a rushy one that is done in this way. I don't know what is the obsession of this government having an election next year. I mean,
Mhm.
you are still in control, so and I feel like there's one important motive that they are trying to make, because you still have you have almost the powers of you're doing things on your own way, as the presidency is doing it today. So, but you still wants to get to an election. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve very fast that you want elections to get done so you can
Yeah,
have that? Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, I think there's something that maybe they are planning for. Yeah. It's either
absolutely.
it's just like we say, it's either the elimination of someone or something else. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and I was reading also like some Facebook posts, and
Mhm.
I think there are a lot of people who seem to propagate the idea that South Sudanese want elections. But I think civil society too seems to suggest that South Sudanese want uh, an election, and that sentiment is very strong. But I also think that South Sudanese want security. Uh, they want to fairness, not just another peace deal, because we've had a lot of peace deals that have not materialized into some of the positive changes that we would
Right.
like to really see, in the country and in our own lives as South Sudanese.
Yeah, I think there was a survey carried out, and on and if South Sudanese really wants election, and majority of them really responded that positively, they really want an election.
Yeah,
But what is the reason of these South Sudanese wanting an election? They are tired of the current status quo. They are tired of insecurity in the country. They are tired of having a government that exists in place but seems not to, I mean, not performing its duty, and it's not held accountable. They are tired of going to another country, being forced, just to go and live in the refugee camp. That is the reasons why they want an election, because they believe that if they have an election, they would have that opportunity to elect the people that actually they want, and that these people, since they are the one who elected them, they will also have the power to hold them responsible in case they engage in doing other things that is are not of their will. That is the reasons why these South Sudanese desperately need elections. But what is the importance of going towards an elections that is going to cause more harm than the one that you're going today, right? So there's no need for that, right? I mean, I understand the desperation by so many South Sudanese of wanting an election because they want an end to everything that is happening in the country today. But they should also understand that going for an elections without a well-prepared election will be more hurting and will create more harm than having even no elections at all, right?
yeah,
So they should understand that. So I understand the belief by so many young people. Perhaps they have that obsession of going to a ballot, polling station, and maybe casting their votes for the first time. They also want to experience that. They want to have that experience of waking up early in the morning, going to the polling station, and I mean, uh, doing casting your vote. They want that as well. But we can have that when we have an election that is not uh, done in the most credible way. So whereas we know we most of us want that to happen, we should also take understand it from the view of having it not in a credible manner and its impact. What is it going to cause to us, right? Vis-a-vis what
yeah,
is happening right now. I think that is one thing that is lacking in their obsession, in their need for elections. They don't have that perhaps deeper analysis of how this is going to impact them, right?
yeah.
Hmm.
But I also think that many South Sudanese strongly want an election uh, in December 2026 because they see the election as having ideally the potential to deliver peace, to deliver security, deliver stability, and maybe eventually improve our economy. But I think if the process leading up to the election has started in such a very non inclusive manner, like we've already seen with the recent meeting of the presidency and its outcome, uh, I doubt that the election would have the capacity to deliver the outcomes that the South Sudanese people are hoping it would be able to deliver for them. Because I think, like, genuinely, like you said, we are tired. It's
Mhm.
been a very long time
Right.
of running to different countries, of losing our loved ones and property. We're just tired of that.
Right.
But I also feel like, do the leaders really want deliver the peace and security and the stability and the economic viability that we want to see in the country that can trickle down to improve our own lives, you know?
Right.
Because, come on, Emma, we do not live off handouts from the government.
Right.
We work, but you can only do as much if the place is so insecure,
Mhm.
you see. But
Right.
I also feel like, to some extent, the government maybe, and this particular government could be just preying on the strong interest of the South Sudanese people to want an election, preying on that desire, and use us South Sudanese as pawns to basically keep themselves in power and make themselves seem legitimate to us, while
Right.
our actual suffering continues and never really ends.
That could be true, and you know, just like you've said, I think as you said that majority of the people really wants the peace because they hope that I mean they need the election because they hope that this will actually put an end um, to what's the suffering that most of us are facing. We are tired of everything that is happening right now, going into refugee camp and losing our loved ones and all this stuff. So, uh, but it's unfortunate that I mean our need for an election is mainly centered on having so we could actually have a reform state, a country that can actually uh, have our basic needs met and give us that kind of stability and peace and freedoms and liberty all that is the hope of many young people in the country but that the reality is that this is not the same the same view of the political elites. This is not what they want. Just like you've said, perhaps they're going to use these as and then make it like look legitimate that these are the South Sudanese who want it. But in real sense, they have a very different motive of wanting an election very fast. Perhaps just like we discussed in the initial state of this recording, that uh, perhaps the way why they are making this process to be in a rush way, perhaps they wants to uh, try to consolidate themselves in power. You know, when we go toward an elections without a permanent constitution, then we are likely to have a government form that is not being led by any constitution, and therefore the government that is going to be created is going to have the power to create that constitutions in their favor, and that is going to make them or consolidate themselves in power, stay long in power, and just have all the powers given to one person who could be the president. So that is, or that might be the desperation of the political elite to have an election next year. But that is not our intention as the common people. Our intention is such that we can have a country that can actually get us away from the current status quo, instability, insecurity. I mean, people suffering. Almost most of the states and counties are in need of severe food assistance, and there are floodings coming at some point. I mean, lots of things. This is the reason why majority of us want that elections to be done, so it could deliver all these things that we want. But the most unfortunate part is that this is not what the political elites want. They don't need that at all. They want a situation where they can prolong themselves, stay in power, manipulate our brains, manipulate the constitution, that can give them more time and more powers to control everything. That is the unfortunate part of it. It is unfortunate. That
Yeah,
is the truth that is in the mind of these elites.
absolutely. Yeah. And honestly, like for someone maybe listening to us for the first time, they would think that we are just pessimistic
Right.
about the people in the government. But I really do think that, this is not just about us being pessimistic or dismissive of the
Right.
efforts that the people in government are making, but I think it's just what they have shown us over the years
Right.
in terms of where actually the decisions they make lie,
Mhm.
and the agendas those decisions seem to be driving, you
Right.
see. Because if really they had that in mind, I think we wouldn't be in the current state that we are in as a country.
Mhm.
A lot would have changed.
Right. And
If
and maybe one other thing, Patrick,
Yeah,
we are not just being critical of maybe specific people in the government. I'm not being critical of maybe Kiir and his government, but when I talk about the political elite, I mean everyone. Those who are, whether being in the opposition, whether being Machar, or who, you know, most of these people who are holding these prominent positions right now, they really don't hold any interest of the common people. They don't have it. That's
yeah,
why even when the people don't want to go back to war at some point, these people will go and still create the kind of instability that we're seeing. And they've done it not once, not twice, but so many times. They have worked in against the interests of the common people. So it's always good, if a government wants to thrive, it's good to listen into your critics or people who criticize your opinions. I'm not saying, or I'm not just trying to say that there's nothing good that the government is doing about it. There are perhaps so other things that the government is doing very well, but also we believe that there are things that they need to do much better on it, and these are
yeah,
some of the things that we feel they should, right? Because
absolutely.
we gained independence like almost 14 years ago, and right
Yeah,
from that time, what change have we really experienced that has impacted so much in our lives, apart from over and over again running up and down, going to foreign countries and staying in the refugee camps? What change have we done? What have we created to our people, apart from most of them, the civil servants, even those who really fought for our freedom, going several months without getting paid? They couldn't send their kids to schools. They couldn't even send their kids to the cheapest hospitals in the country. What change have we made when we have young people who should have been actually the heirs of the country? Most of them are just staying their own life. They have nothing. There's no hope. Most of them are losing hope because the government seems not to be prioritizing them. No jobs. Someone goes to school and comes and start doing something that is completely different from what they study in school. That is what the people need change on, right?
yeah,
So when we sometimes when you are in this political position, you become so I would say blind that you don't see really what the people want. But it is good to always hear people who are critical of you, because as a government, as a politician, you don't actually hold the monopoly of knowledge and power and knowing. You don't know exactly what's happening in the ground. And it becomes worse when you are a government and you don't want critics. It becomes worse because the essence of having critics, when we do have civil society, when we do have opposition leaders, when we do have people who are critical of your government, the essence here is that these people get to raise the issues that are actually happening downgrade in places that you're not able to access. And when these people come up with these issues, it informs you as the government of the day, and you get to know about these issues that these people are facing. And this informs the basis of your decision, the basis of your policies that you should. So you've realized that this is a very prominent problem that the people are facing, Therefore, what you should do, you should look around working solutions out that can actually tackle this problem. And the policies you meant, if you want to create bills in the parliament, should be ones that actually centered on solving that problem. So if you're dismissing critics, if you're dismissing opponents, then you are likely to be a government that has no idea what the people are facing down there. So that is the reality about having oppositions in the country, right? So when we're talking about them, we are not really criticizing them for the sake of, or we're not hating people, but we just want the good for the country. We know majority of them have the love for their country. They want the better things. They want elections, perhaps because they want to get out of this mess that the country is in. But also, other people are trying to show you the impact of having an election done when you are not, when it's not seems to be, I mean, premature, right? So as a leader, you should look at all these arguments, comprehend them, analyze, and come up with your final decision. Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
I think really, like we are basically, saying all the good ideas that they have,
Right.
all the good ideas that for a very long time they have promoted to us, all
Right.
the ideas that over the years, because of how well they sold out those ideas to us, we have bought them. We're
Exactly.
saying it's now time to stop talking about them and
Right.
actually implement them
Exactly.
such that we can see the material changes in our own lives and in the country. And I think there's so many other people who have a lot of suggestions, good ones, that have,
Exactly.
I think, potential to
And,
improve how things are in the country. And I think one of those people is Dr. Luca Bion, who
right.
you mentioned earlier from the start of this conversation.
Right.
He has some really interesting suggestions. Dr. Luca Bion is suggesting a couple of options leading up to the 2026 elections. And one of his suggestions is to have partial elections. And the other one is to have a technocratic government. And a third one that is very interesting for me is limiting which seats can be contested for. Do people only contest for the, let's say, president and vice president? Do they contest only for president, leave out the vice president? How about maybe leave out, the parliamentarians, so it's not contested but they are appointed? So I wanted to hear more from you. What do you think about these
I
suggestions
think
by Dr. Luca Bion?
I think I really have a very very profound respect for Dr. Luca Byung. I think he's one of the only, I mean, one of the few scholars that uh, we as South Sudanese we are proud of. I mean, he is one prominent person and a scholar from Harvard University, probably one of the best universities in the world. And over and over again, I mean, he served in the current government before as the president, I mean, minister in the office of the president. He was a member of the SPLM party. And therefore, I really do have a very, very high respect for him. And when I read about his literary craft and that he came up with that article that he wrote about how we should go into 2026, sound interesting. And but out of all the suggestions that he gave, the most interesting one, just like you've said, is the one where we can go for partial elections, where we can only have the executive elected, and then we can defer the legislature. And then when I analyze that, when I look at that suggestion by Luca Biang, um, it really doesn't mean, I mean, that if you are someone who is highly educated as Biong, then you also have the monopoly of knowledge sometimes, right? So whereas I respect him, I have a very profound respect for him, but I also criticize some of his opinions on his article that he published. For instance, when you look at the initial statements that he released on that article, he actually has cited that the reason why the revitalized agreement has come to a standstill is because of the incident that happened early this year in Nasir. And then he again, he went deeper and said that the White Army, and then he continued that which is allied to the SPLM-IO, or which I disagree with him, that the White Army, several times the SPLM-IO, Machar has come out and say he has no command over the White Army. The White Army operates separately, operates differently as an independent armed militia group that is not linked to the SPLM party. And some of the leaders of the White Army have also come out and say they're not linked to the SPLM. But in that article, when I looked at it and then he referred to the White Army as allied to, I think I started questioning his. I started like trying to find out some biases that he was trying to put in that article. And just so you say, the most interesting part of that article, I think it's that where he suggested that the country should go for a partial election where we can only have an executive elected. And in the executive, he mentioned that we can only have the president, perhaps, and his running mate. We can have the governors elected, and then the chief administrators for the administrative areas, and maybe also commissioners. We can have them elected in the counties, which is very interesting. And then we're not going to have a legislature that is elected. We can have it either an appointed legislature or we don't have a legislature at all. I don't know if that is what he meant, but obviously, if you're not going to have a legislature, that will mean we will have one that is appointed by the elected president, or we're not just going to have a legislature. And that brings me to think about the reasons of having a legislature in a democratic state. In every democracy, you always have the three organs of a government that works together. They are intertwined. None of them operates without the other. We always have the executives. That the executive comprises of the presidency, whether being the vice president and the president, and then the cabinet ministers of the states, and then we do have the elected representatives of the people. In fact, the most important part of any government, the most important organ of the government is the legislature, because these are people who comes down from the constituencies that have actually known what the problem the people are facing are, right? So leave alone the judiciary. So the legislature, if we are not going to have a legislature, so what is going to be the the mandate of this government? I mean, the function, the use of the legislature is such that these people hold the government, the executive accountable. They can have the powers of the executive checked. These people can go and actually debate on bills that can be enacted later and become laws of a country that performs a very vital part of any country. So if we are not going to have these legislature in place, this means we are going to have an executive that is unchecked. We are going to have an executive that the presidents will have absolute powers. He appoints, and for instance, if we say we're going to have a legislature that is appointed by the president, we will have these people appointed, and they will just be like a rubber stamp for the executive or the president, because they know that they are appointed by the president. They must always do everything that favors the president. If you're not going to, if the president decides to come with a bill and that these people are going to vote for, they must always vote for it, because they know if any of them don't vote for that bill, they are going to be chased out. They're going to be part of that legislature. That is the danger of not having a legislature in any country. So when I saw that, and then I questioned his I don't know where he got his argument from, why that the country should go into it with their legislature. In fact, if there's anything that needs to be eliminated, it's not even the legislature but the executive. We should not even have an executive, maybe. But I mean, just like I said before, they all play a very prominent part. So in any democracy, the three organs of government are very important. The executive, they come up with, they craft the policies that they want the country to embrace, solutions, and therefore, if maybe these technocrats that works in the ministries, like the undersecretaries, if they come with these policies and they draft them, they can use maybe the government. Members of parliament, maybe a leader of the government businesses in the parliament, they can take these bills to the parliament. They debate about them, right? They debate about them, and if they feel, they go and make consultation with the people down there, and if they feel the people really want this to be enacted into bill, and they go and vote for it. So if we don't have this process established, so we are going to have a very authoritarian executive that is going to have powers unchecked, that is going to pass finance bill that is uh, money that we don't know where it's going to go. I mean, it's just going to be a total uh, kleptocracy and a kind of a total authoritarianism in a country, and that doesn't really make any sense. So I don't subscribe to the belief of Dr. Byung that we should have a partial election. We should, in fact, I have the argument that going for a partial election is more dangerous than going for an election in 2026. So if the president says we should go for a partial election, I just at least let's go for a general election then in 2026. It's less dangerous than having a partial election. That is it. But also another element of his argument where he said we should have like a technocratic political
Mhm.
structure where we can have the current presidency, the presidency, there's the president, the vice president, and then instead of having a cabinet of ministers, we can have some technocrats, people who have been working in the civil service for quite long, probably the undersecretaries in all ministries. They can form that cabinet and they become the ministers. And so should be applied to states, where the most senior civil servant in the state should be the governor. And also the undersecretaries in those state ministries can be or can form the cabinet ministries. That is what he suggested, and that is something that is it's debatable. But again, I mean, I feel like we are going to create some kind of a government that is based on status, on class. I mean, we're not going to, because if we have like a free kind of government where we can have someone who was not even acquired the highest level of education, can still go and become a member of parliament, even appointed a minister. But if we try to create some technocratic kind of government, I feel it's going to eliminate so many people out of the system. There are people who have the will. We have two different kind of people. We have people who have the qualification but don't have the will. But we do have some people who don't have the qualification but they do have the will. So what we need right now as a country, we need people with good political will rather than qualification. We might need the qualification as well, but we're not looking at that the highest level of qualification. We don't look at seniority. If seniority would actually solve the problem of South Sudan, they would have it solved, because most of the people who are today in government, these are senior top government officials who have been there since the liberation of the country, but they have done nothing to the country. So I don't buy his beliefs of that at all. I don't agree with what he said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And I genuinely actually do believe that whereas the suggestions by Dr. Luca Bion are good to some extent, they just offer a temporary fix, not
Right.
really a very radical structural change. I don't think it would be able to deliver that, which I
Exactly.
think is what we need as a country. We need structural changes. We need reforms that change how things at a structural level operate in South Sudan.
That's right.
And going ahead with these temporary fixes could be very dangerous, like you have said, and could end up concentrating power on the president, whoever gets elected, if it is
Right.
Kir or Riek Machar or any other person, to
Mhm.
basically end up concentrating power on these people. And the idea of having the executive and the judiciary and the legislature as separate and independent flies out of the window,
Right.
because basically, like you've said, they become more like a subsection of the executive that are entirely controlled by and loyal to the
Mhm.
executive.
Right.
Yeah. And I
That's
think
right.
that's even very dangerous.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Probably we should look beyond that. Yeah.
maybe that's what I was about to say. Maybe I think I need to go back into his article and then make a deep analysis of it. But otherwise, he had very interesting arguments there, which would provide a temporary solution to the problem of the country. But in the long run, I feel it's not really going to work out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
It
Right.
gives the president a lot of powers
That's
without
right.
any political checks. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, unless maybe we want to go into a totalitarian totalitarian state where everything is
Yeah, but I
controlled by
think
the
we
president.
really don't want to do that because
Yeah.
there's nowhere in the world that members of parliament are appointed. You can never have there are some instances where we can have an appointed member of parliament, but that is also should be enshrined in the constitution, where we
Yeah.
do have maybe some people that are appointed to represent some special groups in the parliament. Like maybe like unions, or we do have the army, or you have the youths. Like in Uganda, we do have members of parliament representing these special groups. So sometimes some of them are appointed, but not majority of them, not ones that actually represents the main constituencies.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely. I think maybe I genuinely wish we had the opportunity to have Dr. Luca Biong here. It would be
Yeah,
nice to have this conversation with him
it's,
directly.
it is really. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was gonna be a good one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just like I say, Byong is it's one of the few elites that the country is proud of, right? So, and he has been writing uh, lots of uh, lots of articles, and
Mm-hmm.
he wrote some books as well. And yeah, he's a great guy. But also, uh, people not I mean, people should understand that we are all humans. We sometimes make decisions that can be criticized, right? So
Yeah.
no one is has the monopoly of knowledge, just like I said, right? So
Yeah.
whereas you give views about certain things, you should also be ready to be criticized about them, because as humans, we don't look at things in the same angle, right? We are
Yeah.
created differently, have different perspective on certain things. So yeah, that's it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I also do think that whereas, there are definitely two sides to the suggestions made by Dr. Luca Biong that can be explored and maybe discussed in depth, and that maybe perhaps could offer, some good temporary fixes.
Mhm.
I think something that maybe even takes this critic of his ideas a little bit deeper is what civil society and observers are calling and say, should South Sudan go into an election in 2026? South Sudan needs security, independent institutions, agreed rules, of how to conduct the elections and everything, but also inclusive participation from all signatories. And I would think that even if the suggestions by Young were good, and let's say maybe parties accept them, if they do not accept them, it would be difficult for them to be implemented.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. I know we can't really have independent institutions, uh, because the independency of institutions, like when we look at the transitional constitution of South Sudan, it established most of the institutions and how they're supposed to operate. So the independency of any institution is only enshrined. I mean, of any institution is enshrined in the constitutions. So,
yeah,
but in an instance where we're heading towards an election without the constitution, so where are we going to refer to the independence of this institution? We are not going to have any binding document that can actually protect these institutions to be independent, because we don't have it. So that raises still the biggest question of having the elections without the permanent constitutions being established in the country. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
right.
Yeah. We still have a lot of important reforms that need to be made.
lot of important ones. We don't. We even need even our army alone. We
Hmm.
don't have a unified. By the way, the most dangerous thing in every country is to have two different rival armies. That's one biggest thing. I mean, we can't have like two different armies in one country. That is the biggest. I mean, like that is a time bomb. I mean,
Hmm.
we can easily see it. We don't have a
Hmm.
unified army in the country. We have armies that subscribe to individuals. They're under the command of individuals,
Hmm.
and we want to go to an elections in a country such as this, where we don't have one army, where the other one subscribes to the president, and then the other one subscribes to the opponent, and that is so dangerous. That is a that's a dangerous thing. We don't have the army as an institution tasked to protect the citizens of the country united.
Hmm.
We don't have an independent and established uh, electoral commission that is supposed to actually run the entire process of an election. If at all we do have it, if it is independent, but it is not well funded. And therefore, we
Hmm.
cannot have an independent one if it's not well funded. How is it going to run all the processes? We don't even
Yeah.
have an established hybrid code that the peace agreement had suggested that should be established before an election. We don't have that hybrid code. How are we going to solve grievances post elections when
Right.
things people find that they are not, they feel that they've been rigged, or the election was not credible, or there was kind of staffing and malpractices during the election? How are they going to handle this issue? How is it going to solve? Who are these people going to run to for help? We don't have these institutions established. So, I mean, it's very hard to have an elections in such an environment, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. That is going to be difficult.
right.
And actually, that really reminded me of something. So, Dr. Luca Bion, in his piece, argues that civil society and citizens must not be sidelined in the processes leading up to the elections, and that civil society and citizens should help to monitor, inform, and hold the leaders accountable. And I'm just wondering, like, from your own perspective, what critical role can civil society, women, and youth play in this regard in terms of
I
the
mean,
transition and the processes leading up to the election?
we know in every country the role of a civil society in almost every country is very important, and because they in most cases are in contact with the common people. They really know what uh, the people want, and therefore you cannot exclude such uh, a civil society from every process of a country, because they seems to be the one that really understand the people better, right? So when we do have groups like the women, the youth, these are all people who are very important. But again, as Byung argued, that we should have them included in all the process. It really might be hard for us to have them included. That means there's some kind of logistical uh, conditions that needs to be made for these people to be included, right? We need to have them maybe taken through some kind of engagements, or have some trainings, or even have some conversation with the leaders, and this have to listen from them, and also the leaders have to listen from these groups. But if we are not going to have an environment provided, because some of these youth, some of this civil society, they really don't hold the same views, just like the political elites. And at some point, they want to criticize some of the beliefs that these people hold. But if we don't have that space created where the leaders can be criticized openly, then it becomes so hard for me to air out my grievances as a civil society activist, or any other, maybe a woman or women or the young people. It's going to be hard because they will fear for their lives. They will fear that if they do this, they become critical of the establishment, they'll probably be monitored and be followed wherever they go. So that's the danger. But of course, they are very important in every democratic process of a country. The civil society is important, women groups important, the youth groups as well, very important in every country. So we cannot eliminate them and then we say we're going to have a democratic state established with the absence of these people, absence of their voices. It's hard to have a democratic state established. Yeah,
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I think, like you, I do definitely believe that South Sudanese citizens cannot and must not be spectators to this process, but they must be active and critical actors that are part and parcel of this process of the election, should that actually happen. Uh, for example, things like, for example, education of the voters, or what we know as a civic education.
yeah,
I think this is a very critical role that civil society can play in that regard, as well as local women groups, youth groups, and very many different other groups, basically, but also peace messaging. And
mhm,
rightly said by you, this could be, for example, post election. I think peace messaging can be very critical and passive. We've seen how uh, sometimes post election violence can be so devastating. And I think Kenya has been an example of that in so many cases. And I think that civil society and South Sudanese citizens can play a critical role, in
right,
peace messaging, but also in monitoring the elections and
right,
documenting abuses.
mhm,
Yeah,
right,
I mean, African countries are not like, I would say, not foreign to the culture of democratic process abuse, whether it being rigging, whether it being what,
right,
or even like sometimes suppression or repression of, for example, the opposition and stuff like that. And I think the citizens can play such a critical role in documenting some of these abuses. Wouldn't you
exactly.
agree?
I totally agree with that. You know, um, in many like when you do have a process such as an election, um, the common people play a very vital role. You know, and there's what we call like the citizen journalism, where the people do direct broadcasting, right? Even in the polling station, that is one way of doing it. So people get to understand the environment around this polling station. What is it like? There are rigging being carried out, there are ballot stuffing, or um, people being suppressed or being threatened to vote for specific candidates. You know, this all needs to be allowed to be done for any state to be considered democratic. And yeah, and this just like you mentioned about the civil society, they really do play a very important role, very important role. Just like you said in civic education, trying to educate the people on their civic duty as a citizen. I mean, these are all very important. If we have a country that the people itself knows what their roles, their duties are, I think they will carry it forward. It's a good one, and that can only be done when we have the civil society brought in and given all the support and the space to actually play their duty in that in a democratic state. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right,
And I think that is important, especially now that there is a deep fatigue, I think, basically around everything to do with the peace deal and
right,
peace processes in the country. I think there's real fatigue because it almost feels as though we are not making progress at all.
right,
And I think in so many cases, that is so true. It's like we are literally two steps forward or five steps back, or one step forward and then two steps back, which is kind of, I think, devastating. But also with this fatigue, there is some real hope. Like
Right.
if you listen to a lot of South Sudanese or read South Sudanese content online, I think you see like this. South Sudanese have real hope that things in the country will change,
Mhm.
and I think I am one of those too. I genuinely do believe that things are going to get better in South Sudan, but I think it requires political will from
Exactly.
our leaders to make that. So maybe in your own view, what are some of the core things we should have in place for us to have an election, a general election?
Very important. We do have most of these things stated in the agreement. One important thing that we should have prior to the election is we need um, a free space, a free political space given to everyone, whether you are in the opposition or even if you are just a mere citizen but critical of the government, you must be given that free space to express your opinions, to express your views on certain things, and just express it freely without the fear of retribution. You know that you can get maybe arrested or tortured or arrested and all this kind of stuff. That when I write a post on my social media handles or when I speak out, I don't get to be threatened or followed after. And then we need that space that when someone, a member of the opposition, get into a national TV and speaks against the government of the day, he is not. He can still go back home and then he sleeps well. These are the kind of the things we want because it is through such free political spaces that we can easily transition into a democratic state. We cannot have a democratic state when we don't have a free space given to people who are critical of the government or people who are critical to those in power. When we do have people critical, you get to learn from them. You know, when you are a government place, you should always take the advantage of having critics because some of these
Absolutely.
critics do have very, very good ideas that you could actually use and just make things work for yourself and your government, and you render service to the people. So creating that free political space for everyone to express themselves in whatever way they want, very, very important. And that should be done before election, of which I don't think it's existing right now. We do have people who are threatened, and that's unfortunate. Second of all, we need the permanent constitution, just like the peace agreement has said. It is through that peace, that permanent constitution that get to establish and then define the powers of the president. It is through that permanent constitution that actually define how long the president is going to serve, maybe for how many terms, what powers he holds, what state does the South Sudan even what is the status? Because we do still have undefined status of our country. We don't know if we are a federal state or we don't know if we're a centralized kind of a state because the peace agreement is stated that majority of South Sudanese would want to be a federal state, but it will only be defined in the constitution. So we can have a federal state where we have the national government and then we do have the states operating separately with different government, have different policies, have their different system, perhaps different education system, have their different policies on housing, there are different policies on healthcare and things to do with transportation, but also we do have other uh, areas where the two governments can actually work on together, things to do with taxation, maybe the national army and security of the country, immigration. We do have this. We need this to be done, the permanent constitution, and it is only in the permanent constitution that can define what state South Sudan is. It is through the permanent constitution that defines the powers of the president, and this is not done. We also need to have a population census. It is through this population census that can inform the voter register, that tells us how many people are registered in the country, what is even the population of the country, how many people are registered as voters, how many people are there in this state, how many people, what is the state with the highest number of individuals of South Sudanese, how many constituency are we supposed to create per this state since is the most populated state, how many constituents are we supposed to come to bring out of here? So this is the purpose of having what the purpose of having population census, but also the other importance of having a population census is such that we get to know about the number of people living in a particular state. So it can inform the government on resource allocation. We get to know that since we have this number of people, we're supposed to take these resources, this number of resources to these people, so that it can actually facilitate their well-being, can provide services, whether being allocation of funds and other things by the central government. It's supposed to be determined by the number of people living in that state. So we can't do that without knowing the number of people. These are very important things. We need reform institution. The electoral commission needs to be independent, needs to be funded. A judiciary with a hybrid code created. That is not done. So these are some of the things that I feel have to be done before we get into an election. Yeah,
Absolutely. And I think honestly, as you were speaking, I was like, yeah, you're just saying the peace agreement should be fully implemented as
exactly.
it was.
In short term, this
Yeah.
is a critical way to implement the peace agreement.
Yes, fully as it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Right.
Yeah, as we wrap up, what are your
Mhm.
final thoughts?
Oh, my final choice is South Sudanese were excited about having an election. You shouldn't. There's nothing exciting about having an election next year if we don't have all these preliminary elements met. If we don't have a permanent constitution, if we don't have population census, if we don't have independent institution established and a reform judiciary with a hybrid court established, there's nothing to be excited about having an election next year. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
I think also, like, if one has the opportunity to have conversation, so at least, make our voices known to these leaders, it's
Exactly.
very important to do that.
Right, right. Because I
Yeah.
feel the government is riding on the notion that the majority of South Sudanese needs an election. So I think it is also we need to come out and say no, we don't need elections since you don't have these things met, so that they can also maybe know our view that has changed. Now we don't want elections because we have certain things not met, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think even like also the recent survey made it very clear that as South Sudanese, we do not just want elections, but we need security.
Right.
We need fairness in the elections, but also basically stability in the country. So these are
Exactly.
very critical thing. Yeah,
That's true.
yeah.
Right.
Well, Emmanuel, thank you so much for coming on to the Spark It podcast once again.
No problem, man. Thanks a lot
It's been
for
a good
having me.
conversation.
I know, yeah. Good one. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
To anyone listening, if you've been following this conversation with Emmanuel and myself, Patrick, thank you very much. Leave us a comment or maybe share this episode with anyone you know and keep the conversation going. Thank you
Sure.
very much. This has been the Spark It podcast. Peace. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks.
Yeah.
A great one.
I